el bruno, el bruto, el cattivo, the good, the bad, and the ugly. These are the different forms of government on our theme today. And of course, in 1966, Sergio Leone made the classic spaghetti western starring Clint Eastwood about a southern group of men trying to get this stolen gold. The only thing it was filmed in Spain. It had nothing to do with the South. But it was a great movie. Eli Wallach, several other well-known actors were in this film. And it got me thinking about the different forms of government. There are good, there are bad, and there are ugly. And I thought this morning I'd start out first with the ugly. Some people call our governor a monarch because of the way he delves out in public policy. But is he really a monarch? Is he like King George? I wouldn't think so. So let me ask, Dave, read what one of our founders thought about monarchy.
In America, the rule of law is king. But where says some is the king of America, I'll tell you, my friend, he reigns above and doth not make havoc on mankind like the royal root of Britain.
Who do you think he's talking about? King George, right? So there's monarchy. There is this thought that from heaven, imbued into an individual or family, somebody is royalty, and they can rule over us, the lessers. Well, that's not really a good form of government. It's been around forever. There's been tribal chiefs, there's been popes, there's been potentates. Monarchy really says you have an abdication of your freedom, of your liberties. Next, there is dictators. Now, this is a painting that I encountered at the Hilton Anatole in Dallas, Texas. The front desk is about 1.5 miles, it seems, from where this painting is on the way to the convention center. I'm walking down to a trade show, and they're bigger than life. I mean, bigger than that freedom poster is this painting. I stopped, I looked at it, and I walked that almost mile back to the front desk. And I said to the front desk person, "Do you have a manager here?" They said, "Of course, what's wrong?" I said, "Well, would you put a killer on your wall at home or in public, like Hitler, Pol Pot?" And the gal looked at me like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you have a painting of Chairman Mao Zedong. Do you know he killed 60 to 80 million people, conservatively, of his own people, democide?" She just looked at me and said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, can you come with me?" So I actually walked her down the hall, all the way around all this other Asian art, to where this painting was. And she looked at it and said, "That's Chairman Mao." I said, "Yes, it is." I said, "He's a killer. Why do you have his picture?" She didn't know what to do. I was just a pain in the ass for their day. And she said, "Well, I'll let my manager know." So, Dave, you have no role. Read what James Madison said about dictators to some degree.
The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elected, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny.
Pol Pot, Adolf Hitler, Chairman Mao, was he a dictator? Was he a tyrant? Of course they were. And again, like a monarch, you lose your freedom. You have no right to exist other than the service of that individual. Next, we have anarchy. Now, anarchy is interesting because it gets a bad rap. What you see on the far right, people think they can do what they want, when they want, wear their black jackets, scream, jump up and down, cause problems, cause chaos. But the true meaning of anarchy, that circle that you see there, everything inside of it means that you don't have rulers, that you are self-governing, that you take yourself as part of one of the 4 foundational ideas of citizenship: self-reliance, self-restraint, self-assertiveness, and to have civic knowledge. Now, I grant you, anarchy can be scary for a lot of people, but if we were citizens and respecting and trusting of each other, as in Atlas Shrugged, in Atlantis, figment of imagination of Ayn Rand, perhaps that circle on the left would be able to come true. But since human nature doesn't change, guess what? We need rules, we need laws. So that brings us here to George Washington. And Charlotte, why don't you read that one?
But if the laws are to be so trampled upon with impunity, and a minority is to dictate to the majority, there is an end put at one stroke to Republican government, and nothing but anarchy and confusion is to be expected thereafter.
Exactly. So I'm demonstrating these ideas of government juxtaposed to our founding fathers, who studied the ancients, who studied the evolution of government. Of course, we've all heard of democracy, our favorite. We hear it every day on television. We have to save our democracy. Well, what is democracy? Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting to have what's for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. Because if 51% of the people say, I want what you have, unless you're well-armed, that's why we have the First Amendment. It's not to go hunting. It's to protect us from those who would take from us our liberties, our freedoms. What we have is a constitutional republic. Now, we hear oftentimes a democratic republic. No, it's a constitutional republic with democratic institutions. And that allows us to do many of the things that we do, exchanging ideas, working within our society, being able to be civil with each other. But so often, it's misconstrued. Sandra, why don't you read this?
A wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government.
To me, that's the perfect paragraph of what our constitutional republic is all about. It allows us to live our lives, to pursue our happiness. Happiness is self-regulation, really. It's not going out and buying things. But it's living in a civil society with our friends and our neighbors, allowing us to interact and keep the fruits of our labor. Abraham Lincoln hated his father. Why? It wasn't because he was mean, made him work. He took the fruits of his labor. Every time Abraham Lincoln earned money, his father confiscated it and said, that's mine. He said point blank many times in the debates with Judge Douglas that he was a slave too. What he meant was he didn't have the fruits of his labor. And any time we pay taxes, our government is taking the fruits of our labor. And there are many good reasons for that. But on the other hand, how much is enough? It never seems there's enough. In fact, they're down in the legislature right now trying to figure out how much more they can get from us as citizens. So I came up with this. I found this little bit on democracy. And Liz, why don't you read this first part?
Sure. In a democracy, the majority rules. If the majority decides they want a new bike, they can take it.
Right. Who else? Read that part. Anybody? Bob? Go ahead.
Sure. In a republic, your bike is your property and you do not owe it to anyone. It cannot be taken against your will by law.
And Kathy? Should read that.
In a republic, the individual is protected from the majority by constitutional law.
So as we kind of reviewed quickly, monarchy, the dictatorship, going into anarchy, democracy, and then a constitutional republic, you see a pantheon of different types of government. And the only one that protects our individual rights, our constitutional rights, is a constitutional republic. So the question comes up when you're engaging with your friends and your neighbors and having a beer or a wine or just having coffee and talking about what our form of government is. Ask them what they think it is, and then have a conversation. And the more we talk and discuss these ideas and talk about a constitutional republic, we'll find the true meaning of what our founders were talking about. In this club, we have some great leaders as well that guide us individually and protect those areas of our assignments that we have for the day, and we have a general evaluator who does that today, and that's Lizzie Shaw. Come on up, Lizzie.